All right, everybody, this is Catholic Dad, episode number 372. What a difference a day makes. I'm talking about the CHAZ semi-autonomous zone within Seattle today and mob rule. And so yesterday I was talking about Black Lives Matter. I believe they're probably well intended. I was talking about the counter protesters, how they're well intended, but this is going to lead to eventual strife in our nation that I don't think people are predicting. You just have to read history and realize it's essentially the communists versus the fascists. And the commies want anarchy and they want to tear the structure down and reinstitute their own authority. And the Nazis want to increase the authority that already exists. And so that's what we have going on in this nation right now. And yesterday I stated that people better realize what they're doing, because once you're in that mob mentality of the communism, the BLM movement that's going through the cities right now, it's really hard to leave the movement because most people don't have the moral authority or the courage to actually step back once the mob morphs, because the mob always does morph. And also I said you better exercise the meekness in your heart if you're a counter protester, because you better have restraint of your own heart before you unleash bullets upon your fellow countrymen and the counter protesters. Well, what a difference a day makes. And I also stated that the mob rule, they want to create anarchy, and I said, and anarchy doesn't exist very long. That anarchy deserves a tyrant. Essentially, the strong man always rises to fill the power void. Well, one day later, we're looking at Seattle. There's something called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. A bunch of Antifa, BLM movement, protester people have stormed. They've essentially kicked the cops out of their own precinct, cleared City Hall, kicked the mayor out of City Hall. And now they have a 6-block area within Seattle that they're controlling. And some guy named, I don't know if if I got his name right. Apparently he's some rapper, but he's a pretty tough looking dude. I can tell you that. His name is I think like Simone Paz or something like that, or Simon Paz or something like that. I just read it on the internet. But he looks like a tough looking dude, and apparently they're heavily armed. And so now you got a 6-city blocks in Seattle, downtown Seattle, that have chaos, and then the chaos went into anarchy, and the anarchy, strongman rose. And now you got a heavily armed dictator controlling 6 city blocks within Seattle. By the way, I'm going to predict something. It ain't going to end well for this guy, because he won't be alive much longer if he doesn't step down and allow himself to get arrested, because you can't tolerate that stuff in your nation. It's just not possible. But all that being said is those of you who are empathetic to the BLM movements, and those of you who are empathetic to the counter-protesters of the BLM movement, you better know what the heck you're doing with your own heart and your own mind and your own community when you step up and join them. Because these movements always start out like going for the thing you want them to do. You want the good intention of justice for all, and you don't want violence against black people from the cops and so on and so forth. But they always morph, and when they morph, they don't just want what that mission is, and they get mission creep. And anyway, mission creep has occurred rapidly. So now let's just say you're part of that movement, and you're in that that 6 city blocks, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where no police are allowed, and now you have this strong man that's morphing the movement, and he has lots of firearms. Are you going to be able to leave the autonomous zone? Maybe he set up a perimeter. Once he sets up a perimeter, are you willing to give your life to get out of that? And that's really the question. It is possible that you won't be able to escape from the autonomous zone without risking getting shot. And so, by the way, this is just a small little microcosm of what happened last century. This is just one little anarchy movement in one little place in one little time. But the fact of the matter is, this anarchy spread across the Soviet Union, and they created a wall to keep people in, the Iron Curtain. They didn't want people going to the West, to freedom, to liberty, to a better place, because they needed their labors, they needed their lives, and they didn't want them to go against the mob, essentially, like that. And so, what are you willing to sacrifice to get out of the mob? And once the mob gets corrupt, because by the way, violent crime's up 300% immediately once this mob got created, and you speak out against it, are you willing to be shot for speaking out against it? I mean, the Soviet Union was horrific, to say the least. And so this is just a little update for you, but you people out there that are believe that you have righteousness and you can storm the streets and break rules and try to create anarchy and chaos. You might get what you wish for, but the fact of the matter is, when you grow like just a little bit of a moral tone to your life, that mob will devour you and kill you and spit you out. It will throw you in meat grinders. Just have to read a book called Gulag Archipelago to find out what happens to you. I mean, they created something called Article 58. If you ever want to read about it, it's essentially the Soviet rule of discipline and law, and it's essentially they enslaved and killed 50 million people under Article 58. Anybody that questioned the authority of the state out loud or even in private but was turned in was came under Article 58, and they were put in prison cells that were freezing cold, naked, 2x2 cells where they couldn't stand, where they had to stand, they couldn't sleep, they couldn't even sit down for days and days on end, and starved and frozen. And then they take them out and say, confess to you what you did. And then if you didn't confess, they'd start hitting you in the genitalia or like cutting you with knives. Confess, you have to confess. So inevitably everybody would confess. Then they'd be put to death because Stalin wanted to get rid of them, and so on and so forth. And then, by the way, in the mob, they used to, in the Volga famine, in Ukraine, what they did was they would have these, apparatchik meetings. Apparatchik, the senior officials within the communist movement, and they would have these meetings, and they'd say, hey, we're going to go into Volga, these resistance farmers, and we're going to kill 200 people or whatever it is, and everybody would stand up and applaud. And why are you going to kill them? Well, we're going to kill them to make them know that the state, they need to worship the state. They need to get rid of their gods. They need to get rid of their guns, and they need to worship us. And we're going to go kill 200 men, and then everybody would be applauding, and somebody would yell, let's kill 250 men, and everybody would applaud, and they'd be sitting there applauding, and there's a room filled with all these apparatchiks, and or these commie interns, or whatever you want to call them, and then like everybody would be applauding. 30 minutes later, they're still applauding. Eventually, people would get tired and sit down, and the first 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5 people that sat down would be taken away and put into the Gulag camp. Because when you gave up applauding, the first people to give up applauding to fatigue from the worship of the state would be put to death or jailed for years on end for re-education. The mob doesn't let you out once you're in it, and so that's what's happening to American people. And I really think I don't really know what should occur here. I'm really glad that I'm not a leader in this country. I'm really glad that I'm just a dad with kids, and that I can hopefully live my life in peace. But something's going to happen, and I ask you to pray for our nation, because the mobs are rising, and it's going to come from both ends. You're going to have the anarchists on the left, the Black Lives Matter protests that are hitting every city right now, and then you're going to have the state stepping up and starting to crank the bolts down on the people, and that's the fascist movement, and they're inevitably going to collide, and it's going to lead to chaos and potential civil war or breakup of our nation. So I don't really know what the answer is, but if you are empathetic slightly with the protests going on in America right now, just think about what happens when you get stuck in the Capitol Hill autonomous zone, and somebody tells you you can't leave under penalty of death. It's a possibility. And so, well, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get to Mass, and pray the daily rosary. And oh, by the way, that Vagana letter that Vagana sent to President Trump the other day, he said that when you combat the deep state, you have to do prayer. You have to pray for good outcome. You have to pray for justice. And so, I would encourage all of you to pray for Seattle, pray for justice, and pray for a quick end to all these protests. God bless you all. Take care. Have a good night. Live a sacramental life. There's some First Holy Communions tonight, so that's going to be wonderful. Take care. Pray the daily rosary.